In the dusty archives of the Dutch West India Company, a single line in an admiral's logbook would one day ignite one of the greatest mysteries in human history. It was April 5, 1722. 3 Dutch ships, led by Admiral Jacob Roggeveen, were slicing through the endless blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean when they spotted a lonely speck of land that appeared on no map. He named it Easter Island, because it was discovered on Easter Sunday. But what Roggeveen and his weary crew saw as they approached the shore defied every expectation and every rule of logic they knew. The island was almost barren, a volcanic wasteland covered in burnt grass and a few scraggly bushes. Not a single tree rose high enough to make a ship's mast, build a house beam, or even craft a proper canoe. And yet, the island was inhabited. A few thousand people emerged from the coast to greet the strangers. Their bodies were lean, their skin tattooed with intricate symbols, their canoes crudely patched together from small planks tied with fiber, far too fragile to survive the thousands of kilometers separating them from the nearest inhabited island. But what truly left Roggeveen speechless wasn't the people. It was them, the statues. Hundreds of colossal stone figures stood scattered across this desolate land. Some towered as high as 4-story buildings, their heavy faces frozen in silence. Others wore gigantic stone hats, weighing many tons each, perfectly balanced on their heads. The statues stood on massive stone platforms, all facing inland, their hollow eyes staring into the heart of the island. Roggeveen wrote in disbelief. We could not understand how these people, without strong ropes, wood, or any kind of machinery, managed to raise such enormous figures, some reaching 30 feet in height. That single question, how, would echo across centuries. For 300 years, the mystery of Easter Island haunted explorers, scientists, and storytellers alike. A convenient theory eventually took root. The islanders, obsessed with their gods and blinded by clan rivalries, cut down the last trees to move their statues. Their civilization collapsed into famine and cannibalism, a tragic parable about human greed and environmental destruction. It was a story that fit perfectly into modern fears. But what if it was wrong? What if the true history of Easter Island is not one of self-destruction, but of engineering genius, lost knowledge, and something far darker? Recent discoveries using ground-penetrating radar, acoustic mapping, and genetic analysis are not just challenging the old theory, they're destroying it. And on its ruins, a chilling new picture emerges. A picture where the statues weren't built to honor the dead, but to contain something beneath. Before we descend into the darkness underground, we must first understand the brilliance that's visible on the surface. Nearly all of the 887 known Moai statues were carved from one single site, the volcanic crater of Rano Raraku. It wasn't just a quarry, it was a factory of gods, a conveyor belt of idols working non-stop for centuries. The stone they used, a compressed volcanic tuff formed from solidified ash, was soft enough to carve. But still, it was stone. Thousands of basalt picks, called toki, were found scattered around the site. Basalt is hard and dense, one of the few materials strong enough to shape volcanic tuff. Imagine the scene. Teams of carvers hanging from ropes on sheer cliffs, chiseling day after day, under the punishing sun, shaving away millimeter after millimeter of rock. Each Moai took years to complete. Yet, they weren't crude or rough. Laser scans by Chilean and American researchers have revealed astonishing precision. Perfectly symmetrical faces, delicate features, smooth contours that seem impossible for hand tools of stone. This kind of perfection hints at something more. Standardized methods, wooden templates, and perhaps even a system of measurement. Generations of craftsmen must have passed down their techniques, improving them until they reached near perfection. And then, it all stopped. Inside the Rano Raraku quarry lie 397 unfinished statues, frozen mid-birth. Some are barely outlined in the rock. Others, fully carved and polished, were left attached to the mother stone by a thin ridge along their backs, as if the workers vanished halfway through the task. The largest of all, known as El Gigante, is over 21 meters long and weighs an estimated 270 tons. It lies there, silent, like a sleeping leviathan, a testament to ambition that knew no earthly limits. But carving was only half the mystery. The real question was always transportation. How did people with no draft animals and, supposedly, no trees, move 90-ton monoliths across 18 kilometers of rugged hills? Some early explorers believed they dragged them on wooden sleds or rolled them on logs. But without trees, that was impossible. In 1955, The Norwegian adventurer Thor Heyerdahl tried to recreate the process. Using 180 islanders and wooden sleds, he barely managed to move a 12-ton statue. For the heaviest Moai, he would have needed thousands of men and forests that didn't exist. Then, in 1986, a Czech engineer named Pavel proposed a revolutionary idea. The statues didn't slide, they walked. He noticed that the base of each Moai wasn't flat but curved, and that their centers of gravity were slightly shifted forward. That wasn't a mistake. It was genius. With ropes tied around the head, teams could tilt and rock the statues from side to side, walking them forward step by step, much like moving a refrigerator. His small-scale experiments worked but failed to convince the scientific world. Until, in 2011, American archaeologists Carl Lippo and Terry Hunt tested it with a full-sized replica weighing 5 tons. A team of just 18 people managed to make it walk. Not only that, it moved efficiently and quickly, and suddenly everything made sense. The ancient oral traditions of the Rapa Nui people had always claimed that the Moai walked themselves, guided by a mystical force called mana. But solving one mystery opened another. If they didn't need trees to move the statues, then what really happened to the forests? And why did such an advanced and coordinated system of carving, transporting, and erecting the Moai suddenly collapse into chaos and silence? The answer wasn't written in stone. It was written in blood and ash. To understand why the factory of gods went silent, we have to turn to the only surviving witnesses of that time, the islanders' oral legends. For centuries, scholars dismissed these tales as myths. But modern archaeology has forced us to reread them. Not as fairy tales, but as history. They tell of a war, a brutal civil war that tore the island in two and forever changed its destiny. According to the Rapa Nui oral tradition, the great conflict was between two peoples. Two castes that once shared the island in uneasy balance. The Hanau Eep, the long ears, and the Hanau Momoko, the short ears. The long ears, named for their stretched earlobes weighted down by heavy ornaments, were said to be the island's first settlers, led by a legendary chief named Hotu Matue from a distant land called Hiva. They were the ruling elite, priests, architects, and keepers of sacred knowledge. It was they who began carving the Moai, channeling the supernatural energy known as mana through the statues to bless and protect the land. The short ears arrived later and became the laborers, the working class whose hands shaped and hauled the stone giants across the island. For generations, this hierarchy held, until resentment began to boil. The short ears, tired of endless toil and servitude, rose in rebellion. What followed, according to legend, was not just a war, it was extermination. The story describes the final battle with terrifying clarity. The last warriors of the long ears were cornered on the eastern peninsula of Poik, where they dug a massive trench called IPO for defense. But the short ears discovered their plan. In the dead of night, they filled the trench with dry grass and brush. When the long ears attacked, the trap was set ablaze. The trench became a wall of fire. The flames consumed the last of the long ears, erasing them from history. It was an act of genocide that scarred the island forever. For years, archaeologists dismissed this tale as poetic metaphor, a symbolic story about class struggle. But in the 1960s, when Thor Heyerdahl returned to excavate the Poik ditch, he found something horrifying beneath the soil. A thick layer of charcoal, mixed with shattered, burned human bones. Radiocarbon dating placed the fire around 1680, astonishingly close to the time mentioned in the legends. Later DNA analysis of skeletal remains from across the island confirmed the existence of two genetically distinct populations. One group was, on average, taller and more robust, perhaps the very long ears described in myth. The war was real, but what were they fighting for? Land, power, or something deeper? Some stories say the revolt began because the short ears were forced to build statues endlessly. Others, whispered only among the island's elders, tell a stranger tale, that the long ears built the Moai not to honor the dead, but to control something. A force. A presence. Something beneath the ground that frightened even the builders themselves. The war, then, wasn't just a rebellion. It was a religious schism, a revolt against the old gods, against what the statues represented. And the result was catastrophic. After the war came the era of Huri Moai, the toppling of the statues. Archaeology confirms this. Nearly all Moai found by European explorers were already lying face down, broken at the necks, long before contact. The victors, the short ears, didn't destroy them randomly. They carefully undermined their bases, tilted them forward, and toppled them face first so their eyes could no longer gaze upon the land. They smashed their necks, shattered their coralline obsidian eyes, the parts that, according to belief, held and projected mana. It was not vandalism. It was ritual murder. The statues had failed to protect their makers, or worse, had become a threat themselves. This deliberate blinding of the Moai marked the end of an age. But it raised a chilling question. What had so terrified the islanders that they would turn against the very beings they had once worshipped? The answer, it seems, was buried beneath their feet. In the early 2000s, the discovery that the Moai have full bodies buried beneath the ground caused worldwide excitement. But that was just the beginning. As technology advanced, researchers began scanning deeper, not just digging but seeing through the earth. By 2024, a multinational team had mapped nearly the entire island using ground-penetrating radar and seismic imaging. What they found shocked everyone. Beneath the volcanic surface lay a vast network of lava tubes, natural tunnels left behind by ancient eruptions. That much was expected. But many of these tunnels, especially those beneath major clusters of Moai, were not natural. Their walls had been expanded, reinforced with dry stone masonry, and connected through man-made passageways that led into geometric chambers, perfect rectangles and circles cut from solid rock. These tunnels linked directly to the foundations of certain statues, forming an underground grid that no one had imagined. This wasn't coincidence. It was engineering. The Moai were not merely placed on the ground. They were positioned over these tunnels, like sentinels guarding the entrances. When archaeologists began to explore the chambers, they didn't find royal tombs or ceremonial halls. Instead, they found signs of intense and violent ritual activity. Obsidian figurines arranged in circles, charred wooden remains, and most disturbingly, human bones. But not intact skeletons. The bones were shattered, burned, scattered. Forensic analysis showed fractures from blunt force trauma and cut marks made by stone blades. These were not burials. They were sacrifices. Soil samples revealed abnormally high levels of phosphates, calcium, and heavy metals, indicators of massive organic decay. Under one particular statue, known as Ahu Tyra, excavators found a human jaw fused into volcanic rock, melted by extreme heat. The surrounding stone had been subjected to temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius, long after the jaw was placed there. This was no accidental fire. It was deliberate, a sealing ritual. The deeper the researchers went, the stranger it became. During seismic mapping of tunnels beneath a ridge of fallen statues, they detected an unexplainable phenomenon, a persistent, low-frequency hum. It hovered between 8 and 12 hertz, just below the threshold of human hearing. And the deeper they went, the stronger it became. It wasn't mechanical. It didn't match any known geological pattern. Acoustic engineers described it as infrasound, but organized, rhythmic, almost like breathing. The scientists couldn't hear it in the traditional sense, but they could feel it, in their chests, in their bones. Several members of the expedition reported dizziness, anxiety, and the eerie sense that something vast and alive was moving beneath them. One researcher later wrote in his notes, "It felt like standing above a giant sleeping engine, or a creature that hadn't yet decided to wake." The chambers themselves had strange acoustic properties. Sound refused to echo. Footsteps vanished into a suffocating silence, broken only by that low, pulsing vibration. And suddenly, the ancient legends began to make sense in a new and terrifying way. Some of the oldest secret chants of the Rapa Nui priests speak of the eyes turned inward, of the Moai facing the island not to watch the people, but to guard something inside it. They called their land Te Pito o Te Henua, the navel of the world. The place where something slept, something that must never awaken. What if that was not metaphor? What if the long ears built the Moai not to celebrate their ancestors, but to seal something beneath the ground? And what if the short ears, in their rebellion, broke those seals? At first, this idea sounded like fantasy, a wild myth born from fear and folklore. But as more data poured in, the evidence refused to fit any other explanation. The Moai weren't randomly scattered. When geologists plotted their positions over radar scans, they discovered a precise pattern. Each statue sitting above a key point in the island's underground network, like massive stone plugs in a lid that covered something below. And then came the final discovery. In a deep shaft beneath a collapsed line of statues near Anakina Beach, archaeologists found a vertical passageway lined with basalt plates. Each plate was carved with spirals, concentric circles, and symbols that matched none of the known Rongo-Rongo script. The shaft descended into darkness beyond the reach of radar and sonar. No one has reached the bottom. Some geologists believe these shafts were part of a geothermal vent system, designed to release gas pressure from the island's volcanic core. But others argue the opposite, that they were made to contain, not release. One researcher, speaking off the record, said something that chilled everyone in the room. If those tunnels were meant to trap something, then maybe we should be asking whether it's still down there. Strange magnetic anomalies, low-frequency vibrations, and bursts of pressure detected beneath the island continue to baffle scientists. None match any natural pattern known in volcanic geology. And there's more. When the statues fell, most of them broken at the neck, they lost structural integrity. If they truly were part of a containment system, what happens when too many of them collapse? What happens when we dig too deep, disturb the sealed chambers, and break what the Rapa Nui spent centuries trying to keep closed? Some believe the silence of Easter Island isn't peaceful at all. It's waiting. For centuries, the islanders carved and raised the Moai, one after another, in an unending ritual. It became their obsession, the heartbeat of their civilization. Then, without warning, everything stopped. No gradual decline, no fading tradition, just sudden, absolute silence. The quarry at Reino Raraku remains frozen in time. Unfinished statues lie half-carved, tools scattered on the ground, ropes frayed and abandoned. It's as if the workers vanished mid-swing, never to return. For decades, historians claimed they ran out of wood, or food, or willpower. But the quarry was not empty. There was still stone. There were still people. Something else made them stop. Recent digs near the unfinished statues have uncovered strange clues, symbols painted in red ochre across the faces of half-carved Moai. They don't appear on any completed statues. Some archaeologists believe they represent curses, warnings left by the final generation of carvers. Nearby, researchers found a pit filled with broken idols, burned plants, and animal bones. This wasn't simple abandonment. It was ritual cleansing, a rejection of faith itself. Whatever the Moai represented had turned from holy to horrifying. And it wasn't just the carvings that changed. The island's rock art, once precise and ceremonial, became chaotic and frenzied. New petroglyphs scratched into cave walls showed figures with wide, terrified eyes, mouths screaming, spirals bursting from their heads, and human bodies surrounded by jagged lines. Flames, energy, or perhaps radiation. In one cave discovered in 2021, there is a chilling carving of a Moai splitting open, with something shapeless and monstrous rising from within. For the people of Rapa Nui, something had gone terribly wrong. The Moai, once protectors, had become objects of fear. Oral stories began to speak of aku, evil spirits corrupting the mana of the statues. One tale described a statue that whispered in the wind, bringing sickness to anyone who slept nearby. For centuries, these were dismissed as superstition. But seen through the lens of recent discoveries, the tunnels, the hum, the sealed chambers, they take on new meaning. The islanders may not have understood the science, but they felt the danger. And when they could no longer control it, they turned against the statues. The toppled Moai, the broken necks, the gouged-out eyes, they weren't random destruction. They were an act of desperation, a last attempt to stop whatever was waking below. After the statues fell, the entire belief system of Rapa Nui changed. The cult of the ancestors collapsed. In its place rose a new and brutal faith, the cult of the birdman, Tangata Manu. Once a year, warriors would risk their lives climbing cliffs and swimming through shark-infested waters to retrieve the first egg of a sacred seabird from a nearby islet. The winner became the spiritual ruler for a year. It was a ritual soaked in blood, violence, and fear, a total shift from the old peaceful worship of the Moai. Religion had gone underground, literally. Ceremonies moved from open platforms to dark caves and volcanic craters. The age of stone gods was over. When European explorers returned centuries later, they saw the aftermath. Fallen statues, broken eyes, barren hills. They assumed the islanders had destroyed themselves. But what if they hadn't? What if they had saved themselves? The Moai may have succeeded in their purpose, holding something at bay, but at a cost too terrible to bear. Everywhere on Easter Island, the ground trembles slightly. Sensitive instruments detect tiny vibrations, not enough to feel, but constant. A pulse, a heartbeat, and in those frequencies between 8 and 12 Hz, the same range recorded in the tunnels, scientists still detect that faint, rhythmic hum. It hasn't stopped. Whether it's geological or something far stranger, no one can say. But the Rapa Nui knew. They felt it in their bones long before modern machines could measure it. They tried to build, to seal, to contain. When that failed, they burned, sacrificed, and buried. And when even that wasn't enough, they walked away. The Moai still stand, their faces eroded but unyielding, staring inward toward the island's heart, toward whatever still sleeps below. So the question remains, what were they truly guarding? A civilization's vanity? A forgotten energy source? Or something that was never meant to be freed? 3 centuries after Admiral Roggeveen first stepped onto that barren shore and wrote of the impossible statues, the mystery remains, not of how they were built, but why, and perhaps of what might happen if we wake what they were built to keep asleep. Because the silence of Easter Island might not be peace at all. It might be a warning.